Good morning, Megan. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for agreeing to this interview.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure.
Yeah. How long have we known each other?
Gosh, I guess, I mean, we didn't go to the same elementary school, but I think
Yeah.
we met in elementary school through, our mutual friends.
Yeah, I think
And then
so.
started going to school together in sixth grade. And um, so probably around 1994-ish. So
Oh my,
30 years,
yeah.
maybe.
It's been a long time. It's so great to reconnect and talk about jujitsu because it's really funny that like we both found it independent of each other. And I think it's interesting. Like it honestly makes a lot of sense just based on some of the similarities we have that we both would fall in love with the sport.
For sure. For sure. It makes sense to me now,
Yeah.
for you and I to both be involved in it. But that said, like, I can imagine if someone had come up to my 15-year-old self and said that you and Laura will both start practicing Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I would have been like, what?
I
You
know.
know, it would have seen, well, first I would have been like, well, what is that? And
Yeah.
then once it was explained to me, I've been like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
But
Same.
um, with the wisdom that I have now about martial arts and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and where life has taken us, it makes perfect sense that you and I would both end up being involved in that.
Yeah. No, like I think back because like in high school, the closest thing would have been like the wrestling team. And I remember I thought the wrestlers were so gross. They smelled and they were sweaty.
And there was always rumors that the wrestling mats had ringworm.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then it got into the weight room and yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. That said, I actually did go to a couple wrestling matches in high school, and I thought it was really neat, but I was kind of afraid to say that out loud because, you know, it was supposed to be gross. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, they're all sweaty and rolling on each other, but it's kind of cool looking at the same time.
Yeah. Well, what's really cool now is I've heard a statistic and I have no idea where it comes from, but wrestling is like one of the fastest growing sports for girls. And
I
I
could see
love
that.
that. Yeah. My friend's daughter is a wrestler. She's God, Amelia is I've known her for like 5 years now. She's like a preteen and she's wrestling and I love it.
I'm sorry, I think my internet connection cut out for a second.
Oh yeah, something
Guys,
but
I'm out in the middle of nowhere, and so our
yeah.
internet's not always the best.
Yeah. So Megan, obviously, I know you and I know your story, but if you want to just introduce yourself briefly to the listeners and to the viewers so they know who you are.
Sure thing. My name is Megan McCall. I am in my late 30s, I guess now. Wow.
We're
That's
like
crazy.
20, right? No. Yeah.
No, I mean, it's like I somehow, I was just 20 yesterday, but now I'm in my late 30s, and I'm not
Same.
sure how that happened. I'm a homeschooling mother, despite having, a bachelor's degree in biology and having advanced medical training, but I'm now a stay-at-home mom and I homeschool my kids, and ended up one day finding myself practicing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah. Um so I just wanted to say too, like knowing you though, like your kids have the like best homeschool ever. Like those kids they are set.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. It's a little bit goofy, which also shouldn't be surprising,
No.
like some of the things that they know about that we'll talk about because we just incorporate schooling into conversation. So if something comes up on the news and it's like, well, let's talk about the history of this. And it's really, it's funny. And they'll come up with some like really interesting facts. Like my son, when he was 7 years old, was like, the greatest maritime disaster in history was the sinking of the Wilhelm von Gustav.
Oh my god, I love that.
I'm like, oh yeah, sorry, I taught my kid that. Random fact.
I think that's great. That's hilarious. So tell us how you got started practicing in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu.
Yeah. So when I was in college, and I was getting ready to go to graduate school, I was looking at some of the places that I was going to be going to and thinking, it would probably be good for me to learn some self defense.
Yeah.
Um, I tried taking a karate class, learned a little bit, but nothing that I felt was very practical for what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And then I took a women's self-defense class where I learned a few cool things, but it was mostly just techniques that could be used when standing, so if someone's trying to isolate you. Never
Yeah.
really addressed what to do if those techniques failed, if
Yeah.
the fight went to the ground. So I can't really say that I felt very confident in defending myself. And I really regretted that I hadn't started martial arts when I was younger. So flash forward, when my first child was born, my son, when he was just shy of 3 years old, I was like, my son, oh, I think I'm frozen again. I'm sorry, I think it froze out again. I
Yeah, no
apologize for that.
worries.
So when my son was just shy of 3 years old, I've decided, my children are going to learn to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And so I started him in Taekwondo,
Mm-hmm.
which he loved. And I thought, hey, I could do this with him.
Yeah.
So I signed up for Taekwondo. I was in my 20s at the time, did 2 classes, realized my old knee injuries from my soccer years and things like that were not working for me with kicking things. I was feeling every kick going up my body.
Oh
So
yeah.
I had kind of accepted the fact that my opportunity, my time to learn a martial art had passed.
Yeah.
And it was my children's opportunity. So continued taking my son, and then later, when my second born came along, taking them to Taekwondo.
Yeah.
Eventually, the school where I was bringing my kids, they became a certified training center under Gracie University
Mm-hmm.
and brought Brazilian Jiu Jitsu into the school alongside their Taekwondo and Kendo programs. And
Yeah.
so when I would be picking up my kids from Taekwondo, that's when the beginner, the combatives class would start. And I was looking on the mats and I was watching these men warming up and doing this. I was like, that looks so cool. And it looks like it wouldn't hurt my knees either. And I would just kind of watch every time. I would stay and kind of hover for a few minutes, kind of like a
Mm-hmm.
creeper watching these people do jujitsu. And I was like, what is that? And they told me it was Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I was like, never heard of that, but that's really cool.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, you should try it sometime. And I was kind of like, yeah, I should. But I hesitated because at
Yeah.
that time there were only men in the class.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at it and thinking, I'm not sure how comfortable I would feel being in that close proximity with a bunch of sweaty men that I don't know.
Yeah.
And I also kind of felt like, well, what would other people think about me? What would these men's wives think about me coming in there and rolling around with their husbands? And
Yeah.
so I hesitated with that, and I was like, maybe one day. But I kept being an onlooker.
Yeah.
And then COVID hit, 2020. And so I wasn't going into the gym at all. My kids continue to train Taekwondo virtually,
Yeah.
as best as you can, do martial arts virtually.
Yeah.
Um, and then one day the school owner reached out to me and he was like, I always saw you watching the Brazilian Jiu Jitsu class, and I'm going to be offering a free seminar for a new women's program that we're going to
Mm-hmm.
be doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, free women? Okay, sounds kind
Yeah.
of cool.
Win-win.
Yeah, so I signed up for it. I was like, I don't have a partner. I have no one to work with. And they told me that would be okay. I could still watch the class and see how it went. So I logged into Skype and I watched this seminar and participated to the best of my abilities without a partner.
Yeah.
It's just, I fell in love with it instantly
Yeah.
because it was the Women Empowered program that Gracie University had put together. And so it was Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, but focusing on techniques that women are most likely going to use in a real world scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And even in this quick 2-hour seminar, one of the things I noticed is while they addressed standing techniques and what to do if someone's trying to isolate you, they
Mm-hmm.
didn't ignore the fact that a fight could go to the ground.
Yeah.
And so they taught a basic trap and roll. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I could defend myself even if the fight goes to the ground. And that's so important. And the
Yeah.
fact that most women's self-defense programs don't address the ground is problematic because not
Yeah.
only is there a high possibility of a fight going to the ground when you consider the fact that about 78% of assaults against women are committed by someone known to the woman? There's always a good chance that the fight could even start on the ground. It's
Yeah,
not always going to start in a parking lot with someone grabbing you by the wrist and dragging you. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I really was like, this is so cool.
Yeah.
Sign me up. So I signed up for the class. And again, it was still pandemic time. So my first sparring partner was my kid's giant stuffed elephant. Um,
Did you
who
name
I
him?
but you know what? I don't regret that because I think in some ways I was more comfortable learning and getting some of these basic skills down because I wasn't worried about accidentally hurting my partner or the awkwardness of this close contact with a stranger. So by the time the school opened up to in-person training again, I had already seen all the techniques at least once with my elephant partner and had a little bit of confidence in
Yeah.
doing that. So I continued training through the Gracie University Women Empowered program. Probably within a couple months, the head instructor was like, hey, I can tell you're really into this. Would you be interested in becoming an instructor for this program in the future? And I was like, oh, heck yes, I would love to. Like,
Yeah.
because I love the program so much. I loved everything that they went into with the program, the jujitsu itself, but also with the Women Empowered program. They talk so much about the psychology of self-defense and the psychology of an assault, and it just really resonated with me so much. The only thing that I felt that our school needed was a female instructor for the program.
Yeah.
So I became very determined to get through the program, take my test. I got my pink belt and immediately signed up for the um, instructor certification program through Gracie University,
Mhm.
which I completed, finalized by flying out to California to Torrance to GU headquarters, where I had the honor and privilege of meeting Henner and Hiran Gracie and their amazing, amazing wives, Eve and Victoria, who
Mhm.
are basically, I mean, they're such advocates for women in jujitsu and
Mhm.
really helped to shape that program. So it was very humbling and wonderful. And I brought it back to the East Coast and have become an instructor at my school. And I love being able to bring it to women.
Mhm.
I did end up crossing over into the coed program, which is
Mhm.
combatives, and then tested out of that. So now I'm in our master cycle level.
Yeah.
Um, I'm the only woman still in our master cycle class, so it was definitely an adjustment working with men,
Yeah.
and we can talk more about that if you want. But
Yeah.
that summarizes where I am in my jujitsu journey.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think, that is a barrier to a lot of women starting jujitsu is the fact that, you know, they might be the only woman in a class and it's male dominated. And so, I really think those women classes and women programs, are a great way to bring women into jujitsu. And then having a woman, I've got a dog bothering. This is Tucker. Say hi,
Hey,
Tucker.
Tucker.
Um, so yeah, having a women's program and then having a woman at the front, showing women that they have a place in jujitsu can be such, an important way to get women into jujitsu. Um, and then, sometimes women will cross over into the men's program. So, yeah, I would love to hear more about, how you crossed over and felt like you were ready to, train with men and what that was like, especially being the only woman.
Right. Yeah, no, it was definitely challenging. And I think had there already been women in the class, I wouldn't have needed to wait to have a women's only program because that was my
Yeah.
biggest barrier was looking out there and seeing it's all men. Um,
Yeah.
so I actually crossed over into the combatives program before I had even finished the Women Empowered program and had gotten my belt. I was about three-quarters of the way through
Yeah.
to testing, but I had enough confidence in my skills at that point that I was like, all right, at least if I'm confident in what I know, I'm not going in there knowing nothing,
Mm-hmm.
then my insecurity about being the only woman there didn't weigh
Mm-hmm.
quite as heavily anymore because at least I was balancing that insecurity out with a little bit of confidence.
Yeah.
Um, So, it was a little awkward walking in there and, trying to find a partner to work with. And, you're kind of approaching a stranger and being like, hey, um, are you comfortable working with me? Because I
Yeah,
also wanted to respect that, they're as much as women might be uncomfortable working with men, it's fair that there could be men who are uncomfortable working with women. And
absolutely.
so making sure I had that consent and finding people who were cool working with me. So it wasn't quite so difficult. The great thing about how Gracie University sets up their program is that there's no rolling until you've passed out of the combatives program and you have at least a combatives belt. So at least at the beginning, it was just working techniques, practicing techniques, and not full on rolling right away. So that by the
Mhm.
time I got to Master Cycle and I started rolling, I had already developed friendships with these men and already felt comfortable working with them before we went full beast mode on each other. Um, so that was, I think, really helpful. I think if I had had to roll on day one, I don't know that I would have felt comfortable doing that.
Yeah,
But I had already established, I had trusted training partners by the time I got to that level of training.
yeah. And
Um,
I think, yeah,
yeah.
I think
Since
that,
then, it's been challenging at times. We all have traumas and things we have to deal with. And the Women Empowered program is a trauma informed program.
mhm.
We don't necessarily get that so much in the co-ed programs. And, there's days when I feel great and it's like, I am perfectly comfortable rolling with men. And then there's days where it's like, I'm not feeling it today.
Yeah,
Um, and I have, luckily, my partners, my trusted training partners understand that as well.
yeah. No, that's so important. And I think that, like, the experienced people in the room, in whatever program, whether it's one that does have you rolling day one or one that, integrates you in, I think the experienced people in the room who have been training for a while can really set a tone by looking out for the new people and, making sure they feel safe, because of, those potential traumas or even just discomfort or apprehension at rolling with strangers. I know when I started, there were people in the class that really like would I felt safe partnering with, and I felt comfortable partnering with. And so, recognizing the new person in the room and kind of being that person for them can really do a lot to keep someone in jujitsu.
Right, for sure. Because if you just go in and you're working with a partner who their only goal is to just defeat you and make you feel humiliated, or,
Yeah,
that's not going to be good for anyone's comfort,
yeah,
regardless of whether you're male or female. So to have, like you said, the more advanced people kind of looking out for the newcomers who, they can roll with them and actually help instruct even while rolling, like, hey, here's an opportunity, my arm is there for isolation, things like that, and really help keep you safe and help keep you feeling comfortable and confident, is really critical, and it's really key to helping to grow the sport for both men and women.
yeah. And then for what, um, even in San Diego, where there's a jujitsu school on every corner, like sometimes I'm the only woman in the class, or sometimes there's one other girl and she's new, and so I have to remind myself to, be the person to look out. If there's a girl day one, um, maybe be that person for her.
Right, and that's really important because I feel like it would be really easy for me to get excited, be like, there's another woman, someone who's size matched with me, and I actually,
Yes.
could go full out, and then realize, no, but I can't do that. That's not going to be kind or fair to this person. So keep that in mind. And like I said, my school, I'm the only woman right now in the master cycle level, but there are other certified training centers within a drivable distance that sometimes I can go to
Mm-hmm.
where there are other women who I can roll with, and I can get that experience, of, rolling with women who outrank me even, and still having that challenge where I can go full out, full beast mode, but also rein it in if I'm working with a woman who's newer to rolling and has less experience.
Yeah, it's definitely, you touched on, the different types of training partners, and, you know, how we can adjust, depending on if it's someone new, someone more experienced. And I love that you call it beast mode, because I call it that too, or I think of it that way. You mentioned that, Women Empowered is a trauma-informed program. And, I think, I can only speak as a woman. So like, I think jujitsu has helped me with, certain things I've gone through in my own life. So I would love to hear more about the trauma informed side of it. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I really credit Henner and Huron and even Victoria Gracie for creating a trauma informed program, for speaking with psychologists and everyone else to make sure that as they're going into the techniques, that they are also going into the psychology of self defense. And all the women empowered instructors, when we go through our training, it's not just the jujitsu, it's what language do we use? How can we recognize if one of our students on the mat is struggling psychologically, and how do we handle that when those moments occur? So I think that's really helped to create a safe training environment. And yeah, so one of the things that we're very conscientious of is the language that we use when we're instructing. Something as simple as, the guard position, which as trained jiu-jitsu practitioners, we know this is a super powerful position.
Yeah.
But if you're a woman who has survived an assault, the guard position doesn't necessarily look or feel powerful. It could be very terrifying and very triggering. So when we're teaching that position, just being conscientious of using the language of, in the guard position, you have your legs around the bad guy, as opposed to saying the bad guy is in between your legs. Because just that simple switching of the order of the words, and it's putting the power into the position of our female students, as opposed to the power being in the perpetrator's hands.
Yeah.
And there's so many other little subtle things that we do that I don't know that our students are even aware that we're doing it when we're teaching, and the language choices that we use, but trying to be very conscientious of our word choice and how we present different scenarios to our students.
Yeah, it is interesting. And the guard position, when you come into jiu-jitsu, you're like, how is this a dominant position? Why is the person who's technically on the, like, it appears to be on the bottom, how are they the ones in control? And so those language choices can really make that difference. And I think also you touched on with regards to, assaults and how sometimes they can already start on the ground. I think, I don't necessarily train for self-defense purposes, but I do think sometimes about, hey, if something came up, how would I use my training? And I think, thinking of the guard position in that way can help somebody if something does happen, like if you're already in a position that, the person might think they have the upper hand on you, how you can turn that around.
Right, exactly. And to that, with the Women Empowered program, there's a whole series of techniques in that, from the guard, that generally aren't taught in our coed programs. We call them guard get-ups, and they're basically ways that you can escape from the guard.
Okay.
And when I've talked about those with my male colleagues, they're like, well, why would you want to when the guard's a power position? Well, it is. I was like, but if you're looking in the case of an assault against a woman, we in the Women Empowered program, we break down the assault into 4 different phases, and those phases are different, whether it's from a known perpetrator or an unknown perpetrator. But in the final phase of an assault, one thing that I have to explain to the men is you can't take for granted that clothing is being worn. So the guard might not be a position you want to stay in. And so to have a way to even be able to escape from that position, other than performing, of course we teach submissions from the guard, but our guard get-ups teach you just how to get out from underneath the guard, if that's the best case choice for you at that time, which you're not necessarily going to get that in a coed program.
Yeah. And it also it's the difference between using jujitsu in a self-defense scenario versus sport jujitsu. In self-defense, you're trying to neutralize and get away. In the sport, you're 2 points for this, 4 points for that. And it's just a different practice. Both have their fun and their value for sure, but it's different.
Exactly, exactly. Like, I love being in Spider Guard, but I
Yeah.
often think I would never do this if I was actually on the street. Like, this would not be practical in that
Did you
scenario
did you know
versus
though,
the women
um
empowered techniques.
yeah, so Spider Guard, I learned this from one of my coaches, was developed by, I don't know if it was a child or someone smaller, and it was a way to keep a heavier person's weight off of them. So like I am not a Spider Guard player. I'm not really a guard player, but when I'm like rolling against the bigger guys at the gym, sometimes I use it just to get their weight off of me and then move to something else.
Right. Yeah. Because sometimes you just need to breathe for a moment too, and you get that pressure off your chest.
Yeah, sometimes it's I was rolling with this black belt and he was like, okay, I'm gonna put my full pressure on you for a few seconds just so you can see how it feels. I was lying there like, oh my god, this is terrible.
Oh no. Yeah. But there's value in that and knowing what that
Yeah,
feels like too, because I often think about that when I roll with the men versus the opportunities I get to roll with women. Rolling with men who are often 100 pounds heavier than me and, of course,
yeah,
stronger and everything else, it feels very different than rolling with women. But I'm grateful for those opportunities because it's given me the confidence to know that, hey, if I can roll with these men who actually have jujitsu training and are, trained fighters. And if I can go for 5 minutes without them submitting me, then certainly if I ever had to defend myself on the street with someone who likely isn't a trained fighter, I
yeah,
have that confidence to know I can do this. And I have learned to be comfortable in the chaos and even to be comfortable with someone mushing me into the ground and feeling that weight and knowing like, all right, maybe if I just bridge up a little bit, then I can expand my diaphragm underneath me and get some breath for a while and to just hold position until an
mhm,
opportunity presents. So there is a lot of value in those
yeah,
moments, in those
and
training opportunities.
yeah, and being comfortable in the chaos. I love that. That might
Yes.
be our episode title. Um,
Yeah.
so where you are now is you're are you still teaching the Women Empowered program?
I am. That's probably the main thing I would say I do with my jujitsu journey. I still enjoy training in the coed program, but I'm kind of doing that at my own pace. My
Yeah,
real passion really is bringing jujitsu to women and giving them a comfortable environment. One of the things that really motivates me is I learned through my own experience that you can't learn to defend yourself without learning at the same time that you are worthy of defending. And so bringing that to women just means so much to me. And
yeah,
it brings me so much joy to see my students where they come in and then where they are by the end of their training, the confidence they have, and even their ability to set boundaries, because setting boundaries is key for everyone,
yeah,
but especially for women. And the fact is, we're much more likely to set a boundary if we believe that we can enforce it.
yeah.
And so I love being able to give that to the women who come into my class.
Yeah, no, I mean, I, look back on some of my own life experiences and how realizing after the fact, like, you know, where the boundary was ignored and what that led to, um, can, you know, and so that really resonates with me. And I think it resonates with a lot of women. And yeah,
For sure. And that's in the Women Empowered program. In addition to the jujitsu, we talk about boundary setting
yeah,
boundaries with strangers, but also techniques and plans for setting boundaries with people you know.
yeah,
Because again, we don't ignore the fact that most assaults against women are committed by someone they know.
yeah, absolutely. And if you, I guess, with the Women in Your Women Empowered program, what if a woman was like interested in coming over to the men's program? What would you say to them, or how would you kind of encourage them to make that cross?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I do always try to encourage the women, especially if they're showing interest in it, to go ahead and do that, because the more jujitsu they know, the more confident they're going to be in
Yeah,
real life. And then also just to continue that training and to get that experience even working with men if they're comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Um, but I also recognize the fact that some women, they want to train jujitsu, but they might never be comfortable working with men. And I try to remind them that that's okay too, to
Yeah.
find a program where it could be a co-ed class, but if there's women that they can work with, and to
Mhm.
feel comfortable saying, hey, I'm not comfortable working with men, if that's the case, but to still continue on their jujitsu journey and to learn more. I think it's really important to empower the women to be able to do what they're comfortable with, but still pursue more jujitsu knowledge and more jujitsu skills.
Yeah. What would you say you love the most about training jujitsu?
That's an excellent question. I really love just bringing it to the other women, but what I
Yeah.
love for myself, I think it's just made me feel so much more confident in who I am and my ability to live my life. To be able to stop at a gas station late at night and not, you know, feel scared, just
Yeah.
trying to live, to be able to go out. One of the things I had wanted to do for years was to go on a solo sunrise hike. So to climb a mountain alone in the dark and watch the sunrise. But I didn't
Yeah.
have the confidence to do that before because I'm like, what could happen to me? And since training jujitsu, I have done that. That's a goal that I have accomplished. So I think that's my favorite part. There's something to be said too about, you're having a bad day and you get into the gym and you either teach a class or, you learn something new and you roll with these men and maybe you beat them and you're like,
Yeah.
you just feel so powerful again, like whatever has happened during your day that has made you feel, overwhelmed or helpless. And then you get into the gym and realize, no, I'm not helpless. If I can handle the situation here in the gym, then I can handle whatever's happening in my life
Yeah.
and to be able to overcome it. So I love it. There's the endorphin rush, there's the adrenaline rush of a good roll.
Yeah.
And then also the challenge of learning something new, because I don't want to be one of those people who stops learning just because I'm out of school.
Yeah.
And you know me, I'm a complete and total nerd. So it's like,
Same.
I look at the physics of it sometimes when I'm learning a new technique. I'm like, oh, well, that's why that works. And, you
Yeah.
know, nerding out on like, I've brought physics equations into my class before. I'm like, well, this force equals, or pressure equals force divided by area. So if you increase the surface area, then you're decreasing the pressure. Um,
I do
so
think like
I
jujitsu
just
is a
love it.
sport for nerds, totally.
It is. It
Yeah.
is because it's all about leverage, right?
Yeah.
And some of the smartest men that I know are men that I've met in my jujitsu class. I train with a nuclear physicist. There's a guy who works at NASA. I'm like, okay, we have at least one lawyer. I think there might be more. Like, so there's a lot of really intelligent people doing jujitsu, and the women in my women's class. I've had several people who work in like molecular genetics and all kinds
Yeah.
of, really intelligent people who seem to be drawn to jujitsu. And I think it's because of the physics aspect of it,
Yeah.
the practicality of it.
Yeah. No, I agree for sure. What do you find most challenging about training jujitsu?
I think for me, the most challenging aspect of it is where I am dealing with the male to female ratio
Yeah.
in the co-ed class because I have trusted training partners and I appreciate what I'm able to learn from rolling with these men and the confidence that
Yeah.
I have in my ability to defend myself on the street. But when I do go to other schools and I get to work with people my weight class, um, it's like that's the only time I really feel like I can practice it as a sport as opposed to feeling like survival. So
Yeah.
I would love to see more women in jujitsu.
Yeah.
I think that would basically solve that problem. And I don't know that I'd have really any holdbacks on
Yeah.
doing jujitsu if that were the case.
Yeah. And that's, a goal of this podcast is really to tell stories like yours of women who train and practice and just show women like there is a place for you in this world. So that we can get more training partners and get more women into the gyms. So I think that's awesome. And your kids train too, right?
They do. They do. They're all but the youngest right now, because I
Yeah.
have two stepchildren as well. They're all
Yeah.
doing jujitsu. And I even, like, sometimes I bring my daughter when I'm teaching my class, even though she's not old enough to be in class. I know she's
Yeah.
watching and I know she's listening and
Yeah.
absorbing so much of what is being said. I love the idea of, you know, my son he watches and he knows, hey, women are strong and powerful and
Yes.
need to be respected.
Yeah.
I see that affecting him and the young man that he's growing into. And then I
Yeah.
also see the girls knowing how powerful they are and knowing that they have the right to defend themselves and the right to
Yeah.
set boundaries and the confidence to do so.
Yeah.
Because, like, when a 7-year-old can do a good double leg takedown, she feels pretty good about herself.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Oh, that's awesome. That's beautiful.
and so, we'll sometimes be at home and someone will be like, hey, can you help me with the technique? So, working with the kids at home and having it be something we can do as a family as well. It just, it makes it fun. And it's something that we're able to then relate to. If we're having a hard conversation with the kids, and then you can make a jujitsu metaphor or a parable so that they're able to understand, whatever explanation you're trying to give for whatever situation. To have something that we all share in common like that has been really powerful and effective for our family.
Yeah. Oh, I love the jujitsu families. I love when people, yeah, like the kids are in the kids class and the parents are in the parents class, or like you're at an open mat and the kids are running around. Oh, I love that. It's great to expose them to that kind of empowerment and environment, both boys and girls.
Right. And I think it seems all the different facilities I've been to seem to try to create a family friendly environment, because they'll
Yeah.
have a place where kids can sit while the parents are training, without being disruptive. And then they also encourage the parents to get involved with the kids when it's the kids' classes. So it's really great that it is a sport that seems to fit all ages. Talking about how my knees were hurting when I was trying to do a striking martial art.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say anything bad about the striking martial arts, but it does seem that they can be harder to get into as an adult versus, um, most of the jujitsu practitioners I know all started as adults.
Yeah. And you
Very
see
few of
like,
them I know started as children, but children love it too. So it's great for all ages.
yeah, and there's like some women out there on Instagram, like some accounts that I love are Jujitsu Grandma, this woman who is a purple belt in Alabama and is a grandma. And then you've got BJJ Betty, who's this lady who started at like 54 and she's a black belt and wins world championships in the masters division. Like it's like, oh, this is something I can keep for the rest of my life. It's amazing to see.
Right. Yeah. When I was in California for my instructor certification training, there was a lady out there also getting her instructor certification who was in her 70s.
Yeah.
And she was doing it because she had been an EMT all her life and was retired. And the sad truth is that she had seen so many crime victims.
Yeah.
And while she didn't want to be an EMT anymore, while she wanted to retire from that, she chose to get into jujitsu and to become an instructor for it, to be on the other side of it, to help prevent these things from happening. And
Yeah.
she was so inspirational to see this woman in her 70s learning something new for the first
Yeah.
time and passing it on. One of my trusted training partners at my school, he's a grandfather. I know his kids are around my age, and he has grandkids around the age of my kids. And he just started training. I'm not exactly sure when, but it's not something he's been doing his whole life also, either. And he's amazing, and just
Yeah.
doing this at his age, it inspires me as well to remind myself, hey, I can keep doing this and I
Yeah.
can stay fit and I can learn new things even as I get older.
Yeah. And in fact, like it's good for your brain, as you get older, if you never stop learning, like there's research into like dementia and Alzheimer's with regards to just keeping your brain going and how that can help, keep you sharp into your 90s.
For sure, for sure. And then to have a sport that challenges both the body and mind,
Hmm.
but in a way that is healthy, that older people can perform jujitsu.
Yeah.
Even if they have limited mobility, you can adapt it for so many different body types. And it's really
Yeah.
incredible to see that.
Yeah. No, it's pretty awesome. So I have one final question for you.
Mhm.
What advice would you give to someone going in like day one into their first class?
The advice I would give them is day one is the hardest day. The hardest thing is to walk out on those mats for the first time. So if
Yeah.
you can do that, just stick with it and know that it gets easier with time. The more you see it and the more you do it, and to just tell these, I would want to tell these women to just believe in themselves, believe in the power that they have and that they can unlock, and that they are worthy of defending and that they
Yeah.
have every right to learn to defend themselves. Not
Absolutely.
because it's their responsibility to learn to defend themselves, but it is the reality of the world we live in. And so they have the right to be able to do it, and they are so worth it.
That's those are great words. Thank you, Megan. Yeah. Thank you so much for agreeing to the interview and taking your time to talk to me. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate hearing your perspective. And it's just been great getting to catch up with you and hear your story.
Oh, thank you for thinking of me and for inviting me. It's been an honor to be able to share.
All right. So with that, we is if you have like, I might end up having to cut this because I'm now freezing up. If you have, if people wanted to get in contact with you about, your program or anything, is there a best way for them to do that? Obviously, also totally don't have to as well.
Yeah, they could. What would be the best way for strangers to access me? um, I didn't think about that. They could probably find me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Megan McCall. And if they're not on Facebook, I don't necessarily want to put my email right out in a podcast, but I could give it to you. And if they were to reach out to you, would you be able to pass it on?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
And
great.
Facebook is probably the best way too. Or just if they're in the Maryland area, they could come to your Women Empowered class and connect with you that way as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. If you go on the Gracie University website, you can search for women empowered instructors. And if you type in my name, it would come up. Also, if you look for schools in Maryland, I'm at the Damascus CTC. So that would show up there as well. And they'd be able to find me there.
Okay, I think that's perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you again for your time, and I'll let you get about the rest of your Saturday. And let's just keep in touch about jujitsu stuff.
For sure. I love it. And I really appreciate that you're making this podcast to try to get more women into jujitsu. I just think it's really wonderful that you're doing that. So thank you for doing this.
All right, thanks. I'll talk to you later, Megan.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.